Welcome to Decentral Lens, where lifelong friends Plutoshi and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
Okay, here we go. Another week. It's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Another week, another show, and there's so much going on, Disco. There's so much going on. We are in a bull market, and it's funny. In the last couple of shows, you've been asking, like, is this what it feels like? Is this what it? And finally today, I'm like, we've had 58 things to do before the show to talk, just everything going on crazy in the ordinal space. And be like, I think it's safe to say this is it. Like, you're trying to focus on everything, and you simply just can't. So I'm Blue Toshi. I almost called myself Chicago, but that was like a month ago. I'm Blue Toshi, and on my right is Disco. So Disco, how you doing? Welcome.
I'm doing great. And, kind of the quickest thing that I could kind of equate it to, just kind of the change in temperature and pace and everything. It's kind of like, I was working at the restaurant and it was never busy season, right? Like I was at the pizzeria in the ski town and it was during Slack. And then
can I name the restaurant?
You can name whatever you'd like. Go for it.
You were Lefties, right?
No, I was not.
Oh, that's right. You were third base. Third base is the guy who puts the pepperoni and the sausage on, right? Before you shove it in the oven. So you were third base. That's where you start. But I thought it was Lefties, but maybe that was a different place. What was the name of it?
It was a little venture called Smoky Mountain Pizza.
Smoky Mountain. Okay. And I worked at for those who don't know, Disco and I grew up together, and I want you to continue the story, but I worked at the Pioneer Saloon, both in Sun Valley, Idaho. So little breadcrumbs, but that was a long time ago. We've known each other since we were probably 6 or 7 years old. Didn't become close friends really until maybe later middle school, although probably at least had an unspoken alliance before that on the kickball.
And we never crossed each other, but we also never cross-pollinated in homeroom classes at that time. So it was kind of like separate tracks within a small elementary into junior high existence, but definitely in each other's radars and realms and shared experiences for real, and probably more kind of shared adversaries, because we can bring up some of those folks and it's like, I too did not do well with WW or whoever it may be. So that was out there. But to get back to what I was trying to say really quick is
I was literally going to spend an hour and be like, well, we'll talk about the two pitchers and the two both come throwing from the same side. So anyway, please go ahead with your story.
No, I was just saying that it feels like you were kind of the prep cook during the slow season, and then everyone's like, don't worry, once the ski season hits or once the prime time hits, you're not going to be able to think, and it's just going to go real fast. And that's how it feels now. Like when we first started doing the show, September-ish, it was people kind of thawing out a little bit and kind of like, are we maybe getting out of this? Is this going to change? And then, the multi-cyclers were kind of like, yeah, this is how it starts. This is, have faith that it'll turn, because I was kind of like, are we ever going to get it? Is it ever going to come?
Are we in a bowl? Are we in a bowl? Like, it's like the kid in the back seat. Are we there yet?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Give me the bowl, dude. I'd love to get into a bowl. But I actually found myself reflecting last night about, it might be nice if it slowed down a little bit. And then it made me understand what the, kind of OGs would say once the bear hit, like, build in the bear, accept it, take the time. And, a lot of good things can come of it. And I almost, have fond reminiscence or almost, wishful thinking, like, man, maybe if I had a couple more months of the bear, then I'd be more equipped for this. But I think it just comes out and just once it really starts going, I think it just knocks everybody's legs out. Because, we were in a conversation or in a spaces and it was a general sentiment from, everybody. It's like, dude, how do I manage all the new inputs and all the opportunities right now? And it kind of is a theme that I think that we need to address and touch on, which is like, dude, you can't be everything everywhere all at once. You can't catch them all, and you're going to be fine if you don't, so just kind of give yourself a little bit of grace, enjoy that now we're talking about upside and opportunities as opposed to, who's going to drop a hammer and, have the whole thing fall apart. So just enjoy that temperature change. Know that hopefully we're just sitting down to breakfast to what could be, a significant run. And if so, there's going to be wins along the way. And one of the things I keep being told is take some of those wins along the way. Don't take these things for granted. Take a moment to kind of chill, but just give yourself a little bit of grace and, stick to what you're interested in your plan, and don't get sidetracked by all the blinding lights of everything's going up. I'm going to miss out on all of it. So again, comes back to FOMO, but it hits different when you're in an actual bull market.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll echo your sentiments. I wish we were in a bear market longer. We only started this podcast like 3 or 4 months ago. We started thinking about it maybe 5 months ago. That sounds so long ago and so not long ago at the same time. But it's funny. When we first started it, there might have been, especially in retrospect, there were signals that the bull, that there was peaks of the bull, but we just didn't know. The ETF, obviously, we were waiting on. But I wish we had longer to be in the bear, not just to hone this, because I think now we're just getting more and more relaxed and just, like you said, we're trying to give people out there the most honest take we can in the Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe somewhat Solana, and the greater crypto space, and certainly in NFTs and ordinals. But we're trying to give people how our brains work. And like Disco said, we and this is a theme that has been peppered in, but now it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. You cannot be everywhere. Like I made a comment to you last week or last couple of weeks. I'm like, dude, everything is ordinals right now. Everything's going on in ordinals. And yeah, all that Solana stuff that we're not looking at, but we at least put a little money in to ride that train, even though we're not like kind of degenning over on Solana, the art scene there right now. And you nailed it on the head. You're like, dude, there's tons going on in Ethereum. And it makes you realize like, oh, I'm just not looking at it right now because ordinals has completely captivated my attention. Even within Bitcoin ordinals, that art scene, I can't hardly keep up with that. So with Ethereum, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on now, except for, I got the validator, so I'm betting on the network, and that's a pretty cool feeling.
It's great. And it's something that I've been wondering about, and, we get into it a little bit is, people go down what they're most interested at the time. And I know that you have the term, in the ordinal side of it, like the ordinal degenerate mind share and that concept, but it can also be zoomed out to a degree to kind of the whole ecosystem mind share. And we've been talking about this for months. For a while, Solana definitely had the mojo and had the largest, headlines every week or whatever people were talking on that side. We all talked about Ethereum somewhat crabbing. I think that there'll be a time very soon where, that'll kind of change, but there's so many different things to get interested in. There's so many different things being built. I don't think this space has ever had not the reinforcements, but kind of the next rollout of all these things that were built during a bear. And I think that we're going to be blown away just by the innovations across ecosystems. And it leads me to, a question that I have that's more personal, which is tied to like my handle, right? So when I first got in the space, I got really tied to, I went down the Ethereum rabbit hole first, and that was kind of, oh, well, that's what I'm going to tie myself to. And I just think that, moving forward, when we're looking at 2025, moving to 2030, I think that maybe handles that are tied too strictly to a specific ecosystem are probably a bit of a disservice and probably not as relevant moving forward. So that's something that I'm kind of going through in my head. Like, I don't necessarily want to just be like, hey, I'm a, OX ETH or, whatever it is. And I just think as this progresses, we just have to look at the overall space. It's just got all these different things popping that, you don't have to sign a contract to be just aligned with one or the other. Go where you're interested in. And, you're a master at that, going to what's of interest, what really kind of tickles your intellectual fancy at the time. And it's been very rewarding.
You say master, I say ADHD. Like, hey, look at the shiny thing over there. You're like, Toshi, where are you going? Like, we were over here in Ethereum, but like, I go towards what's interesting to me. And I guess like that's how I go through life. I've always done that. And, I think if you do that and kind of follow that little inner voice that in that intuition, like, sometimes when my significant other is always like, you're going to do this thing and you're going to be lucky and you're going to land on your feet. And I'm like, yeah, probably it'll be okay. Cause it's like, you don't give it too much thought, but it's such a good way, knock on wood, to go through life. Like, be lighter, don't be heavier,
Yeah, that's a great point. So that's kind of just something that's going on. It kind of went from 0 to, 100 really quick. And we all kind of knew what was going to happen, but now when you're really, in the movie and it's happening, you got to get your feet set and really kind of set your perspective on it.
Do you have a
little
name?
bit overwhelming.
Yeah. Do you have a name? Sorry to interrupt you.
A name of a potential shared adversary on the playground, or?
No. I'm sorry. Do you have a name like that? It sounds like you're disco, with the OX, you're going to drop that for sure. Do you have you settled on anything, or it's a work in progress?
See, my problem is I really do enjoy the disco. Like, that to me is at the heartbeat of a lot of the music and where things have come from that really just hit my soul, So I do want to try to find a, kind of something that morphs out of there that works well, because I do like, and I love the imagery of disco balls. Like, so I just kind of like that whole thing. So it hits pretty well with me. So I don't feel like completely abandoning it, but I'm open, because some of the stuff that I'm into is probably way even more niche than people would really than would translate to anybody. So I probably will keep more of the broader disco than to go down some of my musical rabbit holes with references that about 13 people worldwide would understand.
Yeah, and obviously the more it gets more and more and more obscure, right? But no, it's cool you're thinking about it. It's just funny. I just think of like our normie friends and people. They'd be like, I listened to their show and they spent the first 25 minutes talking about their fake names, or what we call handles. Like, and to us, it's like, this is normalized conversation. And like, hey, did you get the new inscription on this and that? And like, it's the
boost is happening. They'd be like, what are you talking about, dude?
Yeah. I'm trying to think the RSIC boost. I'm trying to think of what hobby you could do where you would be this passionate. Like, would it be like horse training or horse riding? Like, there's probably some parallels, but maybe super diehard skiers where they have like 96. Like, is it the pow or is it the freshie? Like different words for powder and stuff. Like, and yeah, you just want to punch those guys right between the ears.
Dust on crust.
Yeah, like there's, but those help, because you're like, do I go out today or do I just sleep in and play, EA hockey with my roommates and then just go to work at 4? Like, do I hit the mountain? Because the more you're on the mountain, the more it's all about the powder day. And the year we were there was by far, I think, the best powder year they had in like 10 or 20 years. So we got so effing lucky out there. It was awesome.
I think that the snow systems have changed since that point. So I think that they're luckier now, and more of them either hit kind of California and then peter out a bit, or they come down. So I know that like northern Colorado resorts tend to get more now than I-70 resorts.
So it's almost warming. It gets trapped, because once I know up in Idaho, if the clouds got trapped in those sawtooths, it would just dump, because they almost had nowhere to go. It was like you have to go down the slide. Yeah. But to get in, because it's so deserty and it's not quite as high as Colorado elevation wise, it's hit or miss. Because I know our friends who went the year after us, apparently it was like the worst snow year like ever. So I don't know, lucky, maybe, I don't know.
Well, you're a little late. Okay. Well, you're a little late, but everybody here is still early. Going back to the bull run and the markets and everything from that side of it. So let's just go do a quick kind of overview. There was something that just really stuck out to me yesterday, and it's a macro take, but they had a inflation read come out that was, quote, hotter than they expected from a Wall Street perspective. And that led to, a significant sellout of like 500 points on the Dow, a couple hundred, almost 300 on NASDAQ. And then something happened that I hadn't seen that I'd always been hoping for, which was crypto was up. I mean, Bitcoin was down slightly, but Solana was up significantly. Ethereum was up significantly. As we look to today, when the market, Bitcoin more than made up for anything that went down. So there's always been that argument of the decoupling of, if it's anti-inflation, asset, or, then that makes sense. So finally seeing that kind of come to life was really, we've talked about how it's kind of like the space is growing up and getting kind of accepted and understood. And that was kind of the first time I actually saw a ton of red on the screen, except for, some crypto assets. And I think that's a pretty big overall sign that people are understanding, kind of the benefits of what we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah. I think you make really salient points. I think it's too early to call it a decoupling because yesterday, what was that? Tuesday the 13th, the stock market went down like 1.6%. Bitcoin was down, or maybe the stock market was 1.3%. Bitcoin was down like 1.6%. But you're saying, yeah, but Solana and ETH went up. To me, I feel like once you go into, mainstream TradFi, they're probably like right now, remember, we're on an onloading phase. Like now all these people are nibbling. So it might be too early to just call it like, oh, we're untethering there. I think eventually they will flee to safety in Bitcoin, which will be a very interesting day when if the market goes down 4% and Bitcoin goes up 4% after the initial massive off ramp of folks come in through the ETFs to Bitcoin. But the funny thing is go ahead, please.
But you've seen, with that being said, you saw Bitcoin maybe go down 1% or 2% yesterday. It's up over 5% today, whereas both of the markets are up marginally. Like the Dow's up 45 points. So it hasn't made it back up. And people aren't nibbling with ETH and Solana via ETFs or the TradFi market yet. So it's good to see that going on with retail for folks that aren't buying via, institutions at this point. So I think it's a good sign that people are, kind of, I guess they may be front running, the next round of potential ETFs at this point.
Yeah, I think so for sure. But I mean, again, like today we're still only day 23 or whatever of on ramping the ETFs. I mean, this is brand new, and I guess it's a perfect time to segue in. It isn't BlackRock and Fidelity. They're now among volume-wise the top 5 ETFs, including gold and QQQ. That whole short thing you see in the VIX, and all, like it's already up there after 23 days. Like it took gold, I guess, 2 years to get to that point of volume. And Bitcoin's got there in 23 days. Like anyone who's downplaying this, or traditional media who's probably not covering this much, because we know retail isn't. There's actually a great study on Google searches. Google searches back in the last peak when you got in, and I'm not rubbing this in, but when you got in the 60s or whatever, in the last bull, the amount of Google searches from everyday people was massive. Now it's teeny. There's actually a great chart. Let me see if I can dig it up. Look at this. This is crazy. So Bitcoin Google search volume. So for those who can't see, from 2015 to 2024, you got the price in green. So obviously the price of Bitcoin is spiking. We're over 50,000 now, and the Google search volume. So is that the one you came in at, the 1718, or you came in at the 2021? You came in at this one.
2021.
The 2021. Okay. So for those who can't see, the Google search volume went nuts at the peak in 2017. That was the ICO craze of Ethereum and Bitcoin. I don't know if that's probably when it went from high hundreds or low thousands to like, I don't know, 18 or 20,000. I think that was that local top. And then again, when disco came in at late 2020. So this is the cool thing. At 2024, the Google search volume is way down and the price is spiking. That means it's institutional investors, it's bigger money, and the retail folks haven't even
aren't there yet.
No, because they got burned. The folks who came in got burned in the last one, and traditional media isn't sounding the alarms because they're either being told to kind of suppress a little more, or more likely it hasn't reached a new all-time high. So they're they're just like, oh, when it gets to 68, like wake us up and then we'll start buzzing about it. But at some point, it's going to buzz again. And I'm some people are like, well, screw the normies. I feel bad for them because like they're going to come in at the old local top. Now, maybe that'll be 1/5 of a new local top. I mean, wishful thinking, right? But it's not on mainstream USA's radar. So I thought this chart was just crazy to look at.
No, it's all, I mean, you don't want to say it's all Larry Fink, but a lot of it's Larry Fink, right? And if you look at if you looked at the Super Bowl on Sunday, there wasn't a single crypto ad. And, you would have thought potentially with the approval of the ETFs that they would go for some share of voice with that or do something, but there was completely like it didn't exist. And when you watch, any sort of mainstream media finance, they'll put the tickers down a little bit. Once in a while, they'll maybe show the 3, Solana, Bitcoin, and Ethereum now, but they don't talk about it except to say, oh yeah, it's there, but they don't really give it that coverage. And what's brilliant to what you're saying is we don't need it because the wheels are in place right now. Just the amount of demand from BlackRock alone, I guess, is surpassing the available, mined each day. So it's just eating up everything that's coming. We're, however many days out before the halvening, and it's just a sandwich of what we've talked about. And it just took a little bit longer for the kind of rubber band to spring, right?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because, I mean, let's go over to another of my favorite charts. It's I'm just going to be sloppy today and just go find it.
Sure.
Where are you? It's the one. Yeah, it's this one. So this is basically every exchange here and how much Bitcoin 24 hours, 7 days, and 30-day changes. You just want to see like how much Bitcoin is coming off and on the exchanges, i.e. are people going to cash in? And now with the ETFs, this might be less important, but these numbers a lot came on before the ETFs came out because people were like, oh, I'm going to do some short-term trading here to catch that top. And those people, I was wrong. I thought once the ETFs hit, it would just go to the moon. But there was kind of a reset period where a lot of people had pre-bagged it and then taken their profits off the table. And, we saw, I can't remember how much was put on the exchange, but the 7-day here, you can see for this week, 15,000 Bitcoin have been taken off. So right now, 9.7% of the whole Bitcoin supply is on the exchanges. So that number is going down again. So people are taking it off. Like the more that goes off, to me, that's just a long-term bullish signal. Like the halving's coming, around April 18th, like it just seems to me like the rocket fuels in and this thing's poised to go.
Well, the thing that I guess the factor, and, call me Captain Obvious on this, but I think the factor is people don't want to sell, like they don't. I don't think anyone who's held through and has kind of believed in this and is, since we're not seeing those Google searches and everything like that, there's not going to be a lot of people who are like, yeah, 52 is my exit and then I'm good. It's people that believe. And also you're seeing it and I'm seeing it just with the, some of the stuff popping in the ordinal space. It's still very hard to part with Bitcoin, even harder now because it's kind of gone up, that you're sitting there like you really have to kind of measure what you're looking to get out of something because you're going to have to pay with it. And, it kind of goes to all those demand and supply things where you're like, well, really, I don't know if it's worth me getting rid of any Bitcoin because I want to keep it for as long as I can. So I think that the lack of sell pressure is interesting. I think that, looking at those exchanges, like they're doing pretty well. Like Coinbase, I just looked at, they're announcing their earnings on Thursday after the bell, and they're up over 14% just today. So that's popping ahead of what people are going to see. And those are fourth quarter results, remember. So that was before ETF happened or was approved, because that's early January. So there's just so many ways to kind of look at this, but I kind of defy someone to give me, and maybe this is the ultimate top signal, and I'm going to look back and be like, enjoyed your little short bull run, buddy, but give me a reason why people are going to dump any of this stuff. And I just can't see it right now. I just don't.
Yeah. And with congressional gridlock, with different houses having different control of different things, like it's unlikely that, because legislation, I was just trying to think what could totally rain on this parade. And I'm sure there's other things like a black swan event, and hopefully, the world becomes a more peaceful place and that doesn't happen. But like, I don't think they're going to pass any legislation. And now with that letter, which, we'll get to in a second, but I wanted to share a little story because this is very timely. So my big brother, who I love very much, reached out to me the other day, and he's like, I'm gonna get out of some crypto, and I'm looking maybe at some precious metals. And I never want to be the one to give advice because I could be short-term wrong, but I'm like, I wouldn't right now personally trade the whatever cryptocurrency it is for the precious metals, gold, silver, whatever, what have you. I would trade, if you can and have it, I personally would trade cash for those. Like, yeah, it's good to have some, precious metals, and they're actually quite fun to have. I don't really have much, but they're kind of fun to have. But I would pull it from cash because, the first story that you were telling us about, Disco, was the inflation. I don't know what the exact numbers were, but it sounds like you're saying, it was a little, even with interest rates super high, the number was a little higher than people want. And that's what spooked everyone yesterday. 100%. I mean, in the fact that it was high and interest rates are this high, like, I think the discipline from the Fed actually, I think they were late to respond in this cycle, but they're keeping it high. It's probably hurting a lot of people, but it is probably temporarily keeping inflation down. So, they might be looked at in a good light on this. That's a rock and a hard place. But again, back to crypto, Bitcoin and Ethereum or whatever. I just wouldn't, even though it looks like a nice local little top. It could be. Maybe we go back to 38. Maybe the initial flow dies for a little while BlackRock and Fidelity are training people. But I don't know. I would never gamble that timing, because all it takes literally, and not even Apple or Microsoft, all it would take is for a couple big either, brokers for big family accounts. All it would take is a couple medium-sized folks to come in. And the demand of the Bitcoin right now is already well above the supply that is mined. I think 900 coins are mined today, and the demand right now is like 2,000. I think I saw that chart yesterday.
And Saylor said, I think it was yesterday, that he believes the demand is 10x what it is right now, what can be served. So, like,
wait, say that again. What do you mean? The demand is actually higher than
Saylor believes it's 10 times what people think it is right now. And I just go back to, and we'll think of this. This is kind of, goes back to the exact beginning of the show. It's like you mentioned Black Swan event, and I don't want anyone to get injured. I don't want anything to be malicious, but I wouldn't mind a whole market rocking event or two so that I could, jump back in and do, like if it was just
you're saying a stock market, like an overheating.
In a market, it's like, oh my God, everybody freaked out and panicked and sold everything. I'd be like, there's an entry point,
so Disco's waiting on a pullback.
But I don't see one from from the sentiment and the fundamentals that I understand at this point. And that was Robinhood. They had a surprise up on their earnings yesterday, and that's part of why Coinbase is doing so well right now ahead of theirs, because it was jumps on surprise profit fueled by rebound in crypto and stock trading. So there's little signs that some elements of retail are starting to get going and get in there. But to your point with the searches and things from that perspective, we haven't seen it. And, I'll go playground or, the mall or whatever. I haven't had anybody, I don't hear the chatter about it. I don't hear it, I don't go to a lot of dinner parties, but I certainly don't hear about it, in my IRL scene. Like I keep waiting for people to be like, oh, you know about that? And, I haven't overheard it, but, wait till that happens we've never had that happen coupled with institutional pushes as well. So that's kind of
nobody's asking the questions now. You're absolutely right. Nobody is asking. So again, just the whole Google search thing, retail is just, it's not on the radar. And maybe they're gun shy for now, but this is going to be, we are crossing over to the mainstream, and they are slowly, I guess the best analogy, I was going to say they are oozing their way over to Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is just like, it's just oozing everywhere. It's just going to paint the world orange, Are we in too deep?
Yeah, talk about an echo chamber.
It's just hard not to see that, though. Again, the stock market is open, 268 days a year or whatever. It's open
40 hours a week or whatever.
It's open less than 1/5 of the time. It's probably like 1/6. Bitcoin is open 24/7. It's 550% or 5+ times open more to absorb the world's information. So what Larry Fink is talking about in the tokenization of everything, it might not happen tomorrow because you got all the bureaucracies and stuff, but whatever that way is, where the bridge is kind of built on both sides, because it's hard just to, like, especially with government stuff, like, just think of the DMV, like, how do you streamline that? Like, it's going to be fast on one side, on the crypto side, and probably a lot slower on the other. But you've got to think progressively when our kids grow up and grandkids and all that stuff. Like, I don't see how it doesn't head that way, because it's such a cleaner solution. And with deep fakes and everything, unless you digitally sign something with a public-private key pair, how do you not get everything deep faked? I mean, that's a huge concern. Not something we'll probably cover a ton on this show, but all that stuff that's going on in the news and on Twitter, like that guy basically did a video chat and got through all the 2FAs and robots with a deep fake video person. Like, welcome to what we've been talking about. And thank God crypto was invented 15 years ago and is slowly growing as an ecosystem. So we have this public-private key pair to solve some of these problems. Like, it's almost like things in the world, if you look back, maybe if we look back and take stock of our whole lives, you're like, how was that serendipitous? It's like, to me, like I don't want to get all religious and spiritual, and I definitely won't, but like, look at the shape of a horse. Like, it seems kind of like the same, its back is the same shape as like a rider's hindquarters. Like, to me, it's just like, serendipitous. So again, I'm not going there.
No, I understand what you're saying. And it's like, it's the same. It's similar to, the internet was kind of looking for something, and then they figured out how to use mobile, and you just saw that kind of couple and go and just take off in directions that we didn't understand. And I think there's definitely deepfakes that's really, we probably should cover it. Maybe we'll dedicate something to it, because, that's basically, how do you verify things, right? And how do you see what's legitimate or not? And that's kind of the merger that is very necessary for the relevance of it overall. So I think it's, that's going to be probably more and more interesting globally from a weaponization side of it, but also politically, as we really, gear up into an election here. Like, good gosh, what's going to happen from all those different things? It's going to be overwhelming, I'm telling you.
Well, it's so exciting to be in this space, kind of as we're, I don't know if we're fully done with more the big macro stuff, but this one was interesting, and I think it puts it in perspective. Like Michael Saylor, the laser-eyed whale, who's just like, now he's like meme lord. So MicroStrategy basically is like, we are officially a Bitcoin company. And obviously all of us in this space are like, duh. But, we know he was basically like selling stock options and putting more stock out there, buying more Bitcoin. And it's been working, right? I don't know what his average cost is. I think he's probably low 30s, but obviously it looks like a bloody genius now. It probably got a little tight when Bitcoin went back down to retrace in the 20s, the low 20s, high teens, but he's looking like a genius now. So Michael Saylor has about 190,000 Bitcoin, and the top ETFs, not including Grayscale, because obviously Grayscale now is a higher cost. It's bleeding out. That always had and held more, but all the other ones now have more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor. So, obviously he had a a nice, healthy, medium-sized company. He has been the poster child to gobble this stuff up. But now, we always talk about, we have been since like 2016, the institutions are coming. They're right around the corner, and I don't even think they've fully gobbled yet, but even they're not even on the appetizer. They're like, they showed up early for the party. They're helping you set up and they're like, hey, you're going to finish this bologna sandwich in here? Like, they haven't touched anything and they're already over what he holds. So I thought that was because he was always our litmus test as just minnows, like 192,000 or 190,000 Bitcoin, unfathomable. Now the corporate reach of the ETFs has passed it and we're in day 23. So even more unfathomable, but that just goes to show you whether this is a blessing or a curse. The institutions are here and that number is going to only probably go up, I dare say exponentially.
Yeah. And then you have him also talking about how we're the first Bitcoin development company and kind of position it that way. He's like kind of like a real estate company or this or that. So I think what'll be interesting is to see what else or what other kind of moves they may position and get into. And as you see now, Ordinal starting to take off and all this, chatter about what could be built on Bitcoin and where this could go. And I know there's the old school Maxi, Bitcoin money side of it. But when people start to see, new application layers coming and things from that perspective, how could a company like that is sitting on a load of profit, kind of get into other parts of the ecosystem and space? And is that something that we're going to really see completely different, chapters in the future that we didn't expect?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know you and I have talked about this a lot offline, but it will be interesting what flag Saylor plants in the Bitcoin space because, yeah, like you said, with ordinals, with L2s, with Noster, there's all sorts of cool stuff going on in Bitcoin. And, there's going to be for every 100 little mini companies that form projects, maybe 2 or 3 will succeed. And the reason, and maybe it'll be more, but the reason I say such a low number is because Bitcoin is kind of the first thing where you can just buy it and that's a thing, the Bitcoin itself is going to appreciate the beauty of all the ecosystem around Bitcoin. And I'm a huge Ordinals fan and a huge art lover in that space. And I'm all in for the Runes token. And if that can maybe be a better L2 than Lightning, we'll see because it hasn't come out yet. It's coming to the halvening, but I don't know. Not everything's going to succeed. And it'll just be interesting. Like Saylor, do you, as a Bitcoin maxi, he's not even maxi because I know he's not against ordinals at all. Like some of these guys like Luke Dash Jr. who owns Ocean Mining, one of the biggest miners, they're like anti-ordinals and they think it's so stupid. It should just be money. It's like, that's great, dude. But you're literally going to be doubling or tripling your profits because of ordinals. Yeah. And I won't get too much into it, but there's a whole thing that was a scare that Ethereum's brought up a lot with security of the Bitcoin network. If there's not because everyone was holding Bitcoin, and if you're just doing a couple transactions here and there, the miners aren't necessarily getting, except for the blocks and the block rewards, they're not getting paid the fees. But with inscriptions and ordinals, with RSIC, I just had to do the RSIC boost last night. It was a little 100K file. And I had to pay $300 or $400 for it because when you inscribe something that has a bigger file size, you pay more for it. And that to me, the interesting thing is not only did that flesh out the whole Bitcoin ecosystem, but it also helped with the security of the whole network. So,
because it's being utilized more or...
Well, yeah, because the miners, remember, the halving what's coming April 18th ish, the reward's going to go from, what is it, 650 now, so to 3.75 Bitcoin per block. So it's cutting in half. They'll still be fine rewards, but a lot of miners, all the S9s were already unplugged. I think they came online recently. But if you have less fees and the rewards are getting cut in half yet again at this halvening, and in 4 years, the next halvening, the miners, it's kind of like less scraps, and the more that are plugged in, the more you kind of have to share the spoils with everybody. So ordinals was in a way, I don't want to say it was a savior because, and I was here in 2015. I didn't realize I was a Bitcoin maxi in the early days, and I guess I never was a maxi because I never closed my eyes to other stuff, but I was like, I'm going to hold my Bitcoin. Yeah, I'll get a little Ethereum just because it sounds like it's buzzing. It's kind of like what I just did with Solana. I'm like, not my thing, but then I got some. And then of course now with Ethereum, I'm like, God, I wish I had bought like 1,000 of them at $10 and not just a couple, but shoulda, coulda, woulda. But the more activity on a chain, the more valuable the chain and the more rewards the miners get. And the miners in the Bitcoin world are the chain validators. They are the keepers of truth for it. So it's a win-win. Cause like if Peter McCormack says like, hey, Blutoshi, you dumbass, if you'll buy an epic sat off me. Let's just say he luckily had the last halvening sat. If he had that, I'd be like, dude, I'll give you 5 Bitcoin. He'd be like, you're an idiot. I'd be like, yes, I am. Thank you. And that epic sat, if I wanted to, I could turn around and flip probably for 50 Bitcoin. I would think at least. There's only going to be 15. I don't know how many halvenings. So 100 years. There'll be probably 25 to 30 in the lifetime of Bitcoin as it pays out the rewards to 2140. But sign me up, like I'll be if you think I'm stupid, like sell it to me then. Be like, well, no, like, okay, that's what I thought.
I thought I heard this and I'm not sourcing it. So it may be out of nowhere, but do miners traditionally sell around the halvening?
That's a good point. A lot will start to unplug like the day of, because if it's not if you see no hope in making more rewards than you're spending in energy, you're not going to do it. It's just simple economics.
Yeah.
Right?
But if they listened or were on board with what we were saying in the beginning of the conversation, and they bet on number going up and supply going down, then the reward would be there. So maybe there will be less miners looking to leave just when they start looking at what's happening with the supply and the price action.
Well, yeah, but think about this. You've got to be very deep pocketed to be able to do that. Like you'd literally have to be infinitely deep pocketed, because think about it. What comes up every month for you? Your energy bill. You have to pay it. Yeah. So you're paying the energy bill. So remember, a lot of these guys are selling Bitcoin to cover the energy bill. What their strategy is to hold the remainder. I assume a lot of them will hold it in Bitcoin, but they also need operations to pay engineers, to pay the building fee. Like, so there's a lot of factors involved in that, but a lot of miners obviously have to sell. That's why with the halvening, eventually number go up, because there's simply less for the miners to sell. The rewards are literally the amount of brand new Bitcoin that is going to be issued on April 19th and beyond is going to be cut in half. So 450 Bitcoin a day, which still sounds crazy big, but when you have global demand and now US market demand from whoever, like that goes quick, right?
Yeah. Just to go and talk about a little bit of some of the developments and some of the other chains and stuff. We saw the Solana have their outage, 2 weeks ago, and it certainly didn't seem to impact price at all and belief with what's going on in that. So I think the last time I looked, the Solana was up to like 115 or so. So that had a nice run from there. And I just think, kind of what we were talking about, Ethereum does have some things that are happening. I think on March 13th is when they're moving their new upgrade onto the mainframe. So that's going to be happening. You're seeing, you're seeing this whole restaking thing really get a big narrative. And I know we've kind of promised to do a deeper dive on that, and I think we should.
Just to kind of understand your plate. Just saying.
I know
we've had a lot on our plate with all these spaces, so that was an unfair old friend snipe. But because I am excited to dig in, because I just wonder if we'll be pleasantly surprised if Eigenlayer were like, oh, or we'll be like, yeah, that I could see making, like, to me, my gut is I could see making some fast money, but not only don't be the last one out, don't even be in the middle of the movie theater. Like, you be as close to that exit as humanly possible. But
I'll simply say challenge accepted now that it's been broadcast to our zillions of viewers that yes, I will have to build the bull case to at least express it to you. And we will have a non-biased and nuanced look at, is this restaking something that we've been sleeping on and could it do more than it is? Also, we've talked about it in a couple other shows. You're seeing some, Farcaster getting success on Ethereum. So that's interesting to see. Something that was a little kind of interesting though, and this kind of can be something we can get into, is looking at the whole Yuga stuff, right? And I want to get into the Yuga and the Pudgies, and I want to get into that. But really quickly, I have a question. So I guess Yuga was doing a mint tied to other side, and they went back to having these gas fee issues, like these massive gas fee issues, and people are talking about, should Yuga move off of the main Ethereum and maybe go to a side or move somewhere. And it just leads me to ask this question, and you've talked about it, but I've never seen like where the movie totally ends or where it really goes. So we've said that if you have a collection and the company or whoever's behind it doesn't pay the hosting fee, that then we don't know where actually would those NFTs go. Like, do they just go into are they just disappeared, or will there be any way for people to kind of pull them back and put them somewhere else, or are they just history? So if say that, Yuga kept going on Ethereum and they didn't pay, whatever the hosting company was, they would just really vanish literally. Because if that's the case, that is a stark realization that I didn't really understand. And it's a strong indicator why there's interest in the pure on-chain. Like, really, they would just vanish.
Yeah. So this one's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot there was a little wrinkle in space and time that happened where that came up. So yes, for those who don't know, go back to one of our early shows, like in September, October. We talk about NFT storage and where they're actually stored. And I think a lot of you would be, maybe a lot of people who listen to this show already know, but you would be very surprised that a lot of them are on literally Amazon centralized servers, literally on like a website. It could be taken down for really any reason by a centralized company, but a lot of them are on IPFS. And I believe Bored Apes, so let's just use them as an example. They're on IPFS for their metadata. The contract is obviously on chain, but it points to the metadata, which is on IPFS, and the actual picture is IPFS. So technically, if they stopped paying the bill for Pinata, which is IPFS, and Pinata, get it, you pin the thing up. If they stop paying, then all the decentralized places that will list it have no incentive to do that. So it could theoretically disappear. Now, I wish I had the collection name in front of me, and this is definitely worth a follow. It was like Ape Kids. It was or Baby Apes. It had nothing to do with Yuga. It was just some collection done by some group, but they stopped paying their Pinata bill, and I think they disappeared. A couple MFers had brought it up, and I asked them, like, what collection? But that's something, let's shelf that part of it for now, because that's another one I think. I'm just going to write down Baby Apes, because that's something we want to look into, because that really ties back to what we were talking about a couple months ago. And if we actually had our first example of one that wasn't pinned, that just means Azuki and even MFers, like all these that are on IPFS and Arweave to a lesser extent, are susceptible to not showing up. So again, that's why I have become a total on-chain maxi. That's a really good question.
But let's so let's zoom out, but it's still in the same subject zone, which is there's a lot of talk about Yuga and how it's positioned in market versus Pudgy Penguins, and I don't know if it's technically flipped or not at this point. probably there was a push to make sure it didn't happen, I would assume, right? But that's really kind of getting a lot of attention and interest. Is Pudgy going to end up being a success story out of this that kind of supersedes Bored Ape, which would just be a pretty big statement overall for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these are interesting times we're in, because Azuki obviously was the, if you had to guess 8 months ago before the failed Elemental drop, you would say, who has the best shot? And I don't remember when Pudgy Penguins started running. I know that guy bought it. He's put the plushies in Walmart, but he's basically like, I'm going to treat this like a company and really go for it. And I'm not a Pudgy Penguin holder, but you know what? I'm cheering them on from the sidelines, because you've made the point over and over, like, you can't be everywhere. Right now we're focused more on Bitcoin and ordinals, and the fact that they made that run and they're up at 20 or 21 ETH, whatever they're at, we'll pull it up here, is just incredible. And he's really turned this into kind of a company. I said it's not necessarily my vibe, but it's a vibe and it's a cool one. And like, I salute all the Pudgy Penguins out there, because that's conviction, and I salute that founder who bought it probably for very cheap and was like, I think I got this. Like, I'm going to take a Web3 brand and use my Web2 experience, go in real life, go in store, go plushies, and I think we got something here. And who am I going to argue? I think he is onto something, and I hope Pudgy Penguins run to 100. So Pudgy Penguins is at 21 ETH right now. So it used to be able to do the math easy when it was 2,000 ETH. That'd be what, $42,000. Now we're probably at $55,000 or whatever for a Pudgy Penguin. Bored Apes is still in kind of its descent. It has held firm in that low 20 range, but it's at 23. So the big story everywhere is Pudgy Penguins going to flip Bored Apes? And that would be, not that Bored Apes couldn't flip it right back again, but I would say that would be the end of an era.
Yeah, it's 100%. Like, it's symbolic, and it's not, dancing on any, up or down for any project.
No.
But, it would be, you'd have to pay attention and look at what was going on there and what's been going on from the strategies and the communities and everything from that side of it. And really quick, we've been talking a lot about how you can't be everywhere, right, and you may be not paying attention to certain things or whatever at that time. You're allowed to do that. Like, that doesn't mean, that's actually smart, because you have to at least understand what you're focusing on. And right, with the depth of information available within these things, like, you've done some spaces with Inscribed, and it's like, he can eat and, live and eat and just keep getting more and more information, research, and data tied to, what he's kind of going down that rabbit hole. So you almost have to, consciously pick which one that you're going to focus on at that time, and give it enough due diligence to have a good understanding of it, as opposed to trying to be, I know everything at all times, because that's not possible. Right. So I don't think there's any, it's like, we should be proud of going down what interests us. And it's validating that so many of them are so fruitful in terms of there being so much more material to consume and learn and understand. And I think ultimately, at the end of any of those deep dives, you're going to come away with significant information that can correlate to other scenarios in the future. So I'm all for that. Like, do the deep dives of whatever it is that kind of tickles your interest at that time. It's not going to be a waste of time or effort by any means.
Yeah, and I actually have an example of that. So recently there was something very old in the ordinal space, pre-ordinals, like that predated the first one, and it was kind of these prehistoric sats, and that Casey was using to just educate the people on it. And the way it was presented was in a really cool way. And I got offered these things at a very fair price, in my opinion, but I didn't it took me about a half hour when the person hit me up, and right away I was like, okay, what about this? What about this? He's like, here's a video. What about this? What about this? Like, I can ask questions almost at the speed of light now, but by the time I had asked my half hour of questions, and kind of went back and forth and really thought about it, I missed the opportunity. Like 10 other people or whatever was available, were like, I'll do the research later. I'm in. And maybe I should have done that, but also I don't regret it. It was something that was interesting. I had to wrap my head around it. I couldn't. I tried to think like, okay, with these old sats pre the first ordinal, could I inscribe a collection on them? Like, what are my options here for the future? And I came to some conclusions what I could and couldn't do. And I was in at that price, and he just came back the other day and he's like, dude, he has like 1 or 2 left, but now he wants like 2 to 3x that price. And I'm like, I may regret this. I'm kind of tired because I've had a long day. I'll sleep on it, but I'm probably out. And I woke up, I'm like, and I said, here's the price I am willing to pay. It was a little over the last one, but below this one. And the guy probably won't take it. And that's fine. And I move on with my life knowing I can't hit it all. And I think that's where it's good to have you because we can, I remember you called me the other day. You're like, do I get X, Y, and Z? And I was like, in 3 weeks, when the focus and the light isn't shining directly on this new shining object, do we think it's going to keep running like Azuki did it first or like Bored Apes did it first? And you're like, no, probably not. And it's like, and then let's sleep on it. Let's wait. And then we can reassess tomorrow. So it's good. It's almost good to have a wingman to be like, I'm going in, be like, negative. There are 3 bogeys at 6 o'clock. Be like, I'm holding pattern. Check that 10-4, so.
True. My significant other actually was whipping up a pretty nice meal. She did go to culinary school, which is one of the many things that I'm very happy about.
She's like the coolest person ever. So you're like the luckiest
but she was, we were getting ready to dine, and I'm like, dude, this thing might be popping. Like I'm not going to be focused unless I squirrel down to my little cabin downstairs and see this. And then I'm like, so maybe we can do this a little later. We can push back the dinner because I think I want to jump on this. I reached out to my boy Blue, and he was kind of like, simmer down. Like, I don't know if you need to right this second. I came back up. She's like, what happened? I was like, it dissolved. It diffused a little bit. It's going to be there later. Let's focus on this right now. And just that process, it goes back to, and this is going to, it goes back to kind of that thing of like, don't get too reactive. Like you can get an email and get fired up and you want to fire one back. And what is it? Like 100% of the time you're better off if you walk away for a half hour and come back.
Dude, I was so bad at that when I was younger. Be like, oh yeah, well watch my wordsmith. And you send it the next day. You're like, and it's funny, the older you get, the more like there's some super emergency, because some people just create drama in their worlds. You don't respond to it. Then like 3 other people did, or they might, or people like, I'd always feel like I had to defend myself. And then sometimes other people will be like, hey, leave Blue Toshi alone. You're like, yeah, you're back there. Like I didn't even have to open, and, politically, I've probably always been fast to reach for the holster. And now as you get older, you're just like, I think you do it less because, your kids where you're out, you're just too tired to reach for the holster super fast. But you also realize like, wait, there's benefits to this. This is kind of cool. Like I don't have to hook into everything. And, you make a good point too. Like when you go and have dinner or you're with your kids, like I think the more we're passionate about this space, the more you go into it, sometimes it is hard to unplug. But sometimes I feel like, especially with the show, because the show can be so draining, I find myself being like, I'm picking up the guitar again. I'm just going to sit in the hot tub and watching the sunsets. Like I'm appreciating unplugging more, knowing that to do good, to have good shows with you and have good conversations in the spaces we're doing with all the RSIC stuff and beyond, like you got to be well rested and centered. And each day you can hit a reset button and wake up and be like, I gained that experience, it baked in, and now like LFG, let's tackle this day. I'm feeling good,
Yeah, just because an opportunity presents itself doesn't mean you need to take it,
right?
And that was something that took me a while to learn, before I'm like, well, it's like there'll be other ones, and that's kind of the takeaway we want to kind of give everybody as we kind of sit down to the start of what feels like a completely different sort of bull environment and market. Like there's going to be plenty of different opportunities. Don't chase. Like that's always the, don't be someone else's exit, don't chase. Make sure that everything vibes and feels right for you. There'll be other ways.
Yeah, because if you're hearing about it and you see it just hockey sticking up, and it might keep hockey sticking up, but a lot of times, you're probably exit liquidity. So stay cool. And, at the end of the day, look at your 30-year plan. Like if you're holding this piece of art or PFP or whatever, like is that the one you like? Would you be like, well, it went to zero, but like this thing's kind of cool and it's kind of a part of Bitcoin's history. Like as long as you can accept that, I think you can live with yourself a whole lot more. And I think it's going to allow you to make probably the right decisions on which ones to get.
And it'll free you up to have the opportunity to be able to act on other opportunities which you are not aware of at this time. You know what I mean? You don't want to spend everything in your pocket before you get a tour of the whole area. So there could be new things that come up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I think we hit those pretty well. We've done the ETFs. We've hit the big macro stuff.
I'd throw one thing into the ETF that I just saw come through today. I guess Gensler was doing a little bit of a road show, and he didn't take the time. Oh, this is according to DC Investor. Gary Gensler wouldn't, quote, prejudge the ETH ETF while on CNBC this morning, given that it's an open filing. He could have used this as an opportunity to say why ETH is different, et cetera, and he didn't. And then he makes this point. Meanwhile, Larry Fink and Cathie Wood have stated that they think it's happening with Franklin Templeton making a new filing this week alongside the existing BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK, Grayscale, VanEck, Invesco, and Galaxy. So the thinking is probably if Uncle Larry is sitting there seeing what they're getting off of the bit, there may be a little foot on the old, or, there may be a little string raising somebody's hand when that comes up, and he may not want to, but as we've saw how other things played out, once you start seeing that, and as I say, once BlackRock and those guys get a taste of, the most successful ETF offering of all time, just dwarfing, what took a handful of weeks to what took multiple years. So I don't know. I think it's important to keep an eye on that because that could be a big narrative moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And the ETF being approved by May 31st right now, it's dipped a little, but you're right. It's in the last week or two, it's gone from like a 40% to like a 46%. So whereas people were very bullish at first, it was 60-70% when Polymarket first opened this betting pool. It's so funny that we can use this stuff. What a perfect, awesome. We're showing public sentiment in real time. It's just like, it's insane. Like the betting part doesn't interest me as much as like just the fact that we know people are betting 46-47% chance that it's going to go live. So the sentiment, as Disco was saying, is definitely up a little from the last couple of weeks. And if Gensler isn't attacking it, I wonder if I think of two things, like you said. Is it the steamroller of just Larry Fink and just like there's too much money on the line? Like, no, you are not holding back ETH. You're not holding back Solana. And they might even be like, we're throwing all the shit coins out there. Hopefully there is a line to slow it down at some point after Solana. I don't know why I get to draw the line there, but at some point you almost don't want too much in because then the government could come around and make an excuse like, oh, it all blew up. See, like I could see that being reverse jujitsu. Like, oh God, like what happened?
You're in concert with Cathie Wood's thinking because she said that she sees the ETH ETF happening and that would be the last one for this year. So, that was already kind of in process and things like that. So that's kind of the sentiment that I've been picking up. But again, not financial advice, and do your own research and everything from that perspective. What do you want to get to now, sir?
Well, what do we got? What do we got left?
Well, why don't we touch on this? Because I think out of all the, great things going on and all the interesting things from a technological perspective and the advancements and the innovation, we still have to deal with the fact that we're dealing with, the powers that be. And, there are people in the legislature that have a lot to say against, crypto overall, and then kind of they can create the narrative within their their ecosystem, right? So you have the people on Capitol Hill who will create narratives. We saw that, at the onset of the war when they're saying, oh, but there's so much of this tied to, illicit cryptocurrencies and that's what's funding things. And that's been totally debunked.
Yeah.
And it was really cool because this week, the Blockchain Association and 80 other national security and military figures sent a letter to 4 representatives and 2 senators. And the call to action was to strike down the Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act, which is just, first of all, it's why do you have such an annoying name? You can't even really get it out, like DAMLA. It's irritating. But the net of this, and I want to go deeper and really kind of, put kind of a, my sharp eyes on this, but I wanted to bring it up right now because the net of it was they said that there were 3 primary points that they disagreed with and that they said that should be struck down for. One is that it risks the United States national strategic advantage. 2 is that it threatens tens of thousands of United States jobs. And 3, it bears little effect on the illicit actors it targets. So if I zoom out and look at that, those are probably the biggest points that you could possibly have against something that's against an anti-money laundering. So again, I don't understand, how everything moves in Capitol Hill. I do understand that things get baked under titles and, bills have things in that aren't necessarily the intent that you would see from the title, but kudos and cheers to the Blockchain Association and to the 80 folks that signed on to do this. I just think that we need more stuff like this. It follows a letter from November to the Senate Banking Committee and House Financial Services from 40 national security military personnel to address these misconceptions. And here's a quote from Kristen Smith, who's the CEO of the Blockchain Association. She says, "It's clear there is a mismatch between the assumptions about the role that digital assets play in global financial transfers and facts on the ground. The signatories state clearly that no amount of money, whether it be in gold, dollars, or digital assets, should be used to fund illicit activity, but we must also have a responsible conversation about the latter when it comes to proposed solutions." So give it a fair shake. Nobody wants, things being used and weaponized and, nobody wants that. 100. So don't assume that that's what people are saying. So I just love it when people are fighting back and, just calling out, straight up with facts and like, hey, this doesn't make sense. You're kind of just trying to shove this through. So we'll do a lot more on that in the future. I think it's something that, is going to become incredibly important as we see kind of this quote normalization of digital assets. And we're starting to see that. We got to make sure that the narrative changes within kind of the walls of Congress and Washington, D.C. overall, just for our country's sake in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I think it's something, I don't want to be in a soapbox, but it's something that really kind of stirs us up. And I'm glad to see some of these really powerful folks step in. You have like the head of regulatory from Andreessen, just a lot of folks really kind of putting their name and their backing and where their mouth is. So I love seeing that, and I wanted to just at least shout it out.
Yeah, and I loved your passion with that because you're right. We need to defend our rights, and it looks like, look at the names here. Gus Cordabell, our partner, True Ventures, former General Counsel, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Michelle Kovner, head of regulatory. She's at Andreessen Horowitz now, but she was at FinCEN, Chief Digital Currency Advisor, U.S. Department of Justice, Digital Currency. These aren't like random signatures from like Midland.
It's not a pass around from a meetup.
Yeah, these aren't Midland people, in their 30s. These are people. Shirzad, I'll mess that up, Chief Policy Officer, Coinbase, but former Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economic Affairs. And on and on and on. Dustin Palmer, Bank Secrecy Act Officer, Anchorage Digital Bank, but former Senior Advisor to the General Counsel. So interestingly, you notice all these people have crossed over to crypto because that's where the innovation in this country is going. And these people have been on that governmental side at the highest echelons, and they're like, you are going to stifle this. And this, to me, even though the degen crypto and the ordinal space and NFT space, most degens are just going to degen, but part of our goal is to be in that space with them and have fun and collect art and frolic, but to make sure that this stuff gets through. So Disco, thanks for sharing so impassioned what happened here, because this is truly what kind of drives us as we're older folks in the space to just move our country forward, to make sure America stays competitive and that digital currencies aren't stifled to literally have the US government turned into just a regulatory capture machine. Like, no, thank you. That's not capitalism. That's something else.
Yep. Well said. And, we'll keep everybody posted as we find out more from those ranks. Can you give just a little, and I know you've actually showed some good restraint by not getting into this necessarily up to this point, but could you give a little update just from the RSIC side of the world, like what's going on there in the last handful of hours, 48 hours or so?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. So we've talked about R6 on the other shows. Obviously, the people who know us from Twitter Spaces, we're getting thousands of folks listening to that. And R6 is kind of like this meta protocol layer 2. It's called Runes, and it's going to activate at the next Bitcoin halving around April 18th. And the company that's kind of the forerunner in having the first rune, there's a whole thing about the hard coding of runes from the guy who figured this thing out first, but they're the first ones to really do an equitable airdrop and really make it interesting. I don't even know what we covered last time. I don't want to go too deep into RSIC, but it's kind of going nuts. But now, if you are listening and you didn't know, you live under a rock, get your boost for your R6. Make sure you follow their instructions. Go to Luminix and get your image boosted and then put it in the same wallet as your R6, and you'll get double the mining reward. So who knows what's going to be at the end of this road, but it's been a whirlwind for Disco and I, and it's been a fun ride. I hope it ends well after the halving, but again, I'm not a total degen where I'm betting the farm on any one thing, but this one's interesting because I think, I talk about 98% of stuff that goes into the Ethereum blockchain, Bitcoin, they don't really work out. But this, maybe it's not RSIC, but I don't know. I just see this could turn into something much bigger for the Bitcoin ecosystem. And that's why I'm here and interested, and also my bags. So,
well, I would say just my perspective, I've been, kind of sitting in the background on some of the stuff that's been going on with it, but I've been, ravishingly, consuming information on it. And I think that not even from this is where it's going to end up or this or that, but I just think it's such an incredible example of how something can get rolled out in a way that just captures an imagination. And I don't, I love the notion of where it could end up and how people can do great financially off of it. But I'm kind of grateful just for that content, to a degree, where they've turned this into a imagination, igniter, and it's got, people are wondering who the rune dev is, and people are, it's in the white paper, just so how it's all been kind of orchestrated.
It's a mystery,
yeah. So that it's just been kind of a fascinating choose your own adventure to be a part of, and to kind of watch that all kind of see how that plays out, kind of shows you how potentially different roadmaps can evolve in the future. And we can see kind of some new best in class, rollouts and strategies for different projects in the future.
Yeah, and I think the final note on that, which was a cool point that was brought up in the last spaces, and just go to Bluetoshi, at Bluetoshi on Twitter, X, and you can find the 4 spaces. I put them in the highlight section, so they're really easy to find. But what this has really done is, when you're into ETH NFTs, CryptoPunks, or, and ordinals, you get very tribal. And, Disco and I, we've kind of prodded each other not to be tribal and to really try and look at everything from a holistic standpoint. But R6, because it got dropped to so many collections, so many other people got involved, it actually brought all these different kind of collections together, which, again, to a normie, not that we're talking to normies, but would just sound insane. But there were some really cool moments where the show and the sum of the show was much greater than the sum of the people that were in there. We created a kind of magical place where, I don't want to say high level thinking, because if this all turns out to be a rug, it's and I was a jackass again. So we're not above that, but the game and what the potential with the technology is for Bitcoin is it's very intriguing, and it's something that Disco and I are following close, and we're not even among the most ravenous of people to follow it. So it's cool, and it's bringing a lot of us together, and for that I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it's a great message and a great thing, just to an example to set and kind of a bar to raise for folks, is to look at it from, the overall space is growing. People are going to come in from different, backgrounds and everything like that. Welcome them in, and, know that there's room for everybody to succeed, and there's room for multiple projects to succeed. It's not a winner take all situation. And once you kind of can get people on that kind of thought train and those vibes and emotions, it could really even help us transcend as a space even more than you've seen. So it's a really interesting thing just to kind of see as an example of that coming to life organically.
Should we show that Coinbase commercial, because that was pretty cool.
Yeah, why don't we I think so Coinbase put out an ad, and as we were saying, they did like the QR code a couple Super Bowls ago when it was just crypto ad, just diarrhea all over the Super Bowl. And this was, they're kind of refined with this, and a lot of people are giving this new ad that they just put out, a lot of credit for kind of touching on a pretty cool voice and perspective. So without further ado, I think we're going to try to play through this system, and hopefully you guys can pick up the audio, and if you're interested, go check out the video as well. But this is the new ad about Coinbase, and it's basically from the perspective of Abraham Lincoln and the penny.
Yeah, and I normally wouldn't show a commercial, but Disco brought this to my attention. He was like, this one's actually really good. This is the first good one that we've seen. So without further ado, let's play it.
Again, is that too much to ask for an old top-hatted dreamer? Being on the penny used to mean something. It was worthy compensation for thoughts. But now it's useless fodder for petty wishes tossed out like common garbage 120 million times a year. Even though it's still technically money. It's tortured, humiliated, forgotten. The currency of choice for paying people back with spite. This is $50, by the way. Why are you doing this? Get me off this piece of scrap metal. Make me digital. Let me soar. Imagine me actually paying for stuff amongst the people again, instantly traveling the globe without fees or friction. Old Abe just wants to be good at being money again. Is that too much to ask for an old top-hatted dreamer?
Yeah, I mean, that's very powerful, right? I mean, commercials are good, and when they're striking on something, when they're not trying to be like Coinbase, 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 it's like a radio ad. They're basically saying like, what's the bigger message here? What's like what do you want to resonate with people more long term that they can't kind of get out of their head, it steals their mind share, as we always say on this show. So I thought that was a very good ad, and it sounds like you're saying Coinbase is just pumping today.
Yeah, they're pumping today. And what's interesting, just to follow off of that, is we had like kind of the worst in crypto ads at the last peak, because it was basically, exchanges competing against each other. So it was, kind of that just choppiness and, trying to just get the market share up. And it's nice to see, Coinbase being able to zoom out and do it more from the value add perspective of the currency and the development of the technology. So maybe that's an example of it not being tribal, right? Like it's not trying to do FTX first, So seeing just more of a general approach and kind of getting that through, I think when those messages continue to infiltrate the societal consciousness, that'll only benefit the acceptance of this movement and of the solutions that once you see that you can't unsee. So let's get more people to check that stuff out. That can't hurt.
Yeah. And Coinbase, obviously why they're around is crypto. And even since this show, I don't want to over focus on price, but even just today in general trading, as the market comes to a close, we were 49 the other day and then 50 yesterday. Now we're in the 51s. and we're going close to 52. I think 52 is actually an old local top, so that one might be one to test. But I just feel like it'll test it. Maybe it'll go down, and then more money that's not looking at that, they're looking more long term, is going to come in. Again, not financial advice, but just wanted to poke back there after the Coinbase ad.
Yeah.
So what else we got? I love that ad. I know you said Robinhood did really well with their earnings, and that was mainly crypto focused. That's probably the super TLDR, and with Robinhood, like, nah,
yeah,
like I'm not using it. So, but that's cool.
Oh.
Like they adopted it early. They've had a couple of years to tweak it, and they're benefiting. So just like to all those top people in military who are saying like digital isn't necessarily bad, like it's creating jobs and it's creating wealth and it's more immutable, like preaching to the choir.
It's like why you didn't see like a big lobbying action for, maintaining fax machines. It's like, no, dude, it was easier to do it, once it went digital. So it's time to move on. I just want to say for everybody listening, this is, our show is really, it's educational and entertainment purposes, but it's certainly not financial advice by any means. You've got to do your own research. You got to follow your interests and your narrative and stick to your thesis, right? And don't get in a position where, you're going to get leveraged or you're going to get hurt and put more in than you can afford to lose. And, just try to take those steps back to kind of pace yourself and kind of give resets and realize that, we're sitting here potentially on mile one of a 26-mile race of some sort. So just kind of zoom back, give yourself a little bit of grace and just enjoy the ride, because if you take that pressure off of yourself of having to jump in on this or miss that and just look at just, kind of the beauty of all these different things that are evolving and being offered and thriving, like that's really a magical thing that we're able to experience with this. So I think it's important to stick with that.
With that said, thank you. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.